They forced the Wolfless Omega to bury their dead. Then the ancient tree chose her. Before we begin, imagine this. Somewhere in a forgotten corner of the kingdom, a gentle Omega is about to show compassion to the people everyone else chose to forget. While others turn away, she stays. While others see no value in the forgotten, she remembers their names. Because in this world, true strength is not always loud. And sometimes, one quiet act can awaken a destiny no one saw coming. If you love emotional Alpha King and Omega stories where loyalty is worth more than pride and rejected Omegas rise in the most unexpected ways, you've found the perfect place. Please subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Thank you for being here. Now, let's begin today's unforgettable story. The first shovel of dirt struck Mara Ellison across the cheek before she realized they were laughing. Dig deeper, Wolfless. Vanessa Holloway called from the rim of the grave. The dead are the only wolves who won't complain about your scent. Rain slipped from Mara's chestnut hair and traced her jaw, carrying a thin streak of mud down her pale throat. She did not answer. At 22, Mara had learned that silence sometimes protected the last piece of dignity cruelty had failed to reach. She tightened both hands around the shovel and drove its iron edge into the soaked earth. Behind her, the Hollow Ridge burial ground climbed toward a dark hill where the ancient tree stood against the storm. Its enormous branches had been bare for longer than Mara could remember. Pack elders still bowed when passing it. Children were warned never to touch its roots. Yet no one seemed troubled that the sacred giant looked less alive each winter. 3 graves before dark, Vanessa said. Her polished boots remained safely beyond the mud. My father wants the bodies underground before the Alpha King's men arrive. Mara glanced toward the canvas-covered cart. 3 shapes waited beneath it. Not warriors laid beneath ceremonial silver. Not elders surrounded by grieving families. Bodies. That was what Hollow Ridge called people once they were no longer useful. Were their families told? She asked. Vanessa's expression sharpened. You bury them. You don't ask about them. The words found an old wound. When Mara was 16, she had spent her birthday awake beneath her blanket, waiting for the first whisper of a wolf inside her. At 17, she waited again. At 18, she pressed both hands to her chest until dawn and silently begged the moon goddess for one word. Anything. By 20, she had stopped asking. Nothing had ever answered. The pack gave that silence names. Empty. Moon-forsaken. A mistake wearing a woman's face. Eventually, Mara had begun to wonder if they were right. So Hollow Ridge gave her the work no proper wolf wanted. Sick rooms after fever. Blood on training floors. Graves after violence. Mara climbed from the first pit and crossed to the cart. The dead were 2 men and an elderly woman. Their clothing was plain. One man's knuckles were split. The woman's gray hair had dried against a bruise near her temple. Mara's stomach tightened. What are their names? Someone laughed. Does it matter? Vanessa asked. Mara studied the woman's face. It mattered to her. For one brief moment. Only rain tapping the canvas answered. Vanessa stepped closer. Be careful, Mara. Being useless is unfortunate. Becoming difficult is a choice. She gathered her cloak and walked away. The others followed. Finished before nightfall. Mara waited until their footsteps disappeared. Then she knelt. A worn U bracelet slipped from beneath her sleeve, its faded root-shaped carving catching a bead of water. Her mother, Ruth, had left her only that bracelet and a memory of hands gentle enough to make even illness feel less frightening. Mara took her drinking flask and dampened a clean corner of her skirt. She wiped the dirt from the elderly woman's brow. I'm sorry, she whispered. Inside the woman's collar, she found a stitched name. Edith Mercer. The first man carried a carpenter's token marked Samuel Reed. The second had a folded ration slip belonging to Thomas Bell. Mara repeated each name until she knew memory had taken hold. Edith, Samuel, Thomas. One by one, she lowered them into the ground. Her palms blistered. Her shoulders ached. Evening settled blue over Hollow Ridge, but Mara refused to cover their faces until she had closed every pair of eyes. Someone should remember you, she murmured. The final grave was nearly filled when a strange sensation traveled beneath her knees. Not a voice. Mara knew too well what it meant to wait for one. This was deeper, a faint rhythm moving through wet soil, like a heartbeat buried far below. She froze and placed one muddy hand against the earth. The feeling vanished. Slowly, Mara raised her gaze toward the ancient tree. Rain veiled its massive trunk. Its limbs remained bare against the darkening sky. She almost looked away. Then, far underground, one ancient root shifted toward the three graves. And from the forest road beyond the cemetery, an unseen rider in a black cloak pulled his horse to a silent stop. The rider watched Mara until the last handful of earth left her fingers. From beneath the hood of his black cloak, Callum Prescott studied the lone woman beside the graves and felt an old, unwelcome suspicion settle behind his ribs. He had entered Hollowridge expecting poisoned roots, failed rituals, perhaps simple neglect. He had not expected 3 unmarked burials at dusk, or a young Omega spending her own drinking water on people her pack could not be bothered to name. Your Majesty. Nolan Pierce's low voice came from the trees behind him. Callum did not turn. Not here. Callum, then. Nolan guided his horse closer, green eyes following the king's attention. Garrick Holloway has been waiting at the pack house for an hour. He's prepared a feast. Callum's mouth hardened. Of course he has. Below, Mara pressed the flat of her shovel against the last mound, smoothing the soil with exhausted care. She swayed once. Caught herself. Kept working. Nolan noticed. Who is she? That's what I intend to learn. By the time Mara reached the workers' quarters, her fingers would no longer close properly. She hid them beneath her sleeves before entering the narrow kitchen. Warmth struck her first, then the smell of roasted venison drifting from the main hall. Someone had prepared enough food to feed half the pack. On a side table sat a basket of stale bread for servants. Mara took one piece. You look dreadful. Dr. Lenora Briggs stood near the hearth, sorting dried herbs into small linen packets. Her red and silver hair was pinned low at her neck, and her brown eyes missed very little. Mara tried to smile. 3 graves. Lenora's hand stopped. Who? Edith Mercer. Samuel Reed. Thomas Bell. A packet of herbs slipped from the healer's fingers. Mara bent to retrieve it, but Lenora caught her wrist. Too quickly. Where did you hear those names? I found them on their things. The older woman released her. You should forget them. Mara stared. Lenora had treated her childhood fevers, had sat beside Ruth Ellison during her final illness. She had never spoken to Mara with fear before. Why? Music rose from the distant hall. Horns. Laughter. Lenora gathered the fallen herbs. Because Hollowridge has survived by teaching certain people not to ask certain questions. Before Mara could answer, the kitchen doors opened. Vanessa swept inside in a pale blue gown, her ash-blonde hair arranged with silver pins. There you are. Her gaze traveled over Mara's stained dress. Father wants every servant visible tonight. The Alpha King arrived without warning. The bread nearly slipped from Mara's hand. Callum Prescott. Even isolated packs knew his name. The king who had united the northern territories after years of bloodshed. Mara had imagined someone loud, perhaps cruel. Men with power usually wanted others to feel its weight. Wash your face, Vanessa continued, and stay near the walls. His Majesty is here about the tree, not to inspect Hollowridge's defects. Lenora stiffened. Mara simply lowered her eyes. Yes, Vanessa. The great hall glittered with candlelight when Mara entered carrying a pitcher of wine. Garrick Holloway occupied the center of the room, broad shoulders wrapped in ceremonial gray. His iron signet ring flashed as he raised a goblet. Beside him stood a stranger in black. Mara knew him immediately. Not from portraits. From the stillness. Callum Prescott was taller than Garrick, with short dark hair and a narrow scar descending from his left temple. His ice-blue eyes moved across the room without haste, yet every alpha present seemed careful with his breathing. Mara stayed against the wall. The ancient tree has endured difficult seasons before, Garrick said smoothly. Nothing threatens Hollowridge. 7 years without silver leaves, Callum replied. Roots retreating from sacred ground. For requests for royal burial records left unanswered. Garrick's smile barely shifted. Administrative failures. 4 of them. Silence tightened around the table. Mara poured wine for an elderly councilman and moved away. Then Callum's gaze found her. Her breath caught. There was no recognition in his face, but his attention dropped briefly to her scraped hands, then to the nearly empty flask tied at her waist. Mara felt strangely exposed. Vanessa appeared beside her. Stop staring, she whispered. He isn't here for creatures like you. Mara looked down. Across the hall, Callum slowly set aside his untouched goblet. "Garrick," he said, his voice quiet enough to make everyone listen. "Tomorrow morning, I want to see your cemetery." The Alpha of Hollowridge went completely still, and near the hearth, Lenora Briggs turned pale. Lenora found Mara before sunrise and locked the infirmary door behind her. "Show me your bracelet." Mara's hand moved instinctively to her wrist. "Why?" "Because 3 people are dead. The Alpha King is walking toward their graves, and Garrick Holloway is frightened." Lenora's voice shook on the last word. "Men like Garrick are most dangerous when fear reaches them." Outside, Boots crossed the courtyard as royal guards assembled. Mara slowly extended her arm. Lenora turned the "Warn You" band beneath the lamp, tracing the faded root symbol with one finger. Grief softened her face. "Your mother wore this every day." "I know." "No, child. You know she gave it to you." "That isn't the same thing." Mara pulled back. Ruth had been dead 7 years, yet one careful mention could still open the hollow place beneath her breastbone. "Last night you told me to forget 3 names. Now you want to talk about my mother?" Lenora flinched. "I want you alive." A knock struck the door. Vanessa's voice followed. "Mara." "Cemetery." "Now." Lenora crossed to a cabinet and removed an old medical ledger. She tore out one yellowed page, folded it twice, and pushed it into Mara's palm. "Don't read this where anyone can see." "What is it?" "Something I should have given you years ago." The burial ground was silver with morning frost when Mara arrived. Callum stood near Edith Mercer's grave with Nolan Pierce beside him. Garrick and Everett Shaw waited several steps away. Everett's gray eyes followed Mara as if measuring where a knife might enter cleanly. "You buried them?" Callum asked. Mara glanced at Garrick. His expression carried a warning. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Under whose authority?" "Mine," Garrick answered. Callum did not look at him. "I asked her." Mara's pulse stumbled. No Alpha had ever corrected Garrick for speaking over her. "I was assigned the work," she said carefully. "Were burial rites performed?" "No priest came." "That wasn't my question." She looked at Callum then. His face revealed little, but his tone held no mockery. Mara chose the truth. "I said their names." Everett shifted. Callum noticed. "All 3. Edith Mercer, Samuel Reed, Thomas Bell." Nolan immediately opened a small notebook. Garrick's jaw tightened. "Common laborers, Majesty. Their deaths have no connection to your investigation." "Then you won't mind us examining the bodies." The silence that followed felt colder than the frost. Mara saw Everett's right hand curl. A thin dark stain marked the cuff of his coat. Not blood. Something silver-black, almost luminous where morning touched it. She had seen the same strange residue beneath Samuel Reed's fingernails. "There are more," Mara said. Every head turned. Fear arrived a moment after the words. Garrick's stare hardened. "Explain yourself." Mara swallowed. "More graves. From the last few months. I buried them too." "How many?" Nolan asked. 11. Callum became utterly still. "Names." She gave him every one. Mara had expected laughter at her habit of remembering. Instead, Nolan wrote quickly while Callum listened without interrupting. When she finished, his eyes rested on her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. "You remember all of them." "Someone should." Something changed in his expression, brief and almost painful. Then Everett stepped forward. "The girl is Wolfless. Her senses are defective. We should be cautious about treating her recollections as evidence." Callum turned his head. "My memory does not require a wolf, Shaw. Does yours?" Nolan hid a smile. Mara nearly forgot to breathe. Garrick ordered everyone back to the pack house, while royal guards marked the graves. Mara returned to the infirmary alone and unfolded Lenora's page beneath a narrow window. The handwriting was old, the ink faded brown. Most of the passage described burial fever, but 4 lines had been underlined. "Speak the departed name before the earth closes. Return what they carried to the soil. Let no rank follow a soul beneath the roots. The first root remembers those the living discard." Mara read the final sentence twice. Her bracelet warmed against her skin. Then came 3 sharp knocks from the courtyard door. Through the glass, she saw Everett waiting. At his belt hung a black-handled ceremonial knife. Along its blade, a thread of silver resin gleamed. Everett Shaw did not knock a 4th time. The infirmary door swung inward beneath his shoulder, and Mara barely managed to hide Lenora's page inside her sleeve before he entered. "Alpha Holloway wants you," he said. His gaze lingered on her wrist. then traveled to the cabinet behind her. Now, Mara followed him across the waking compound, aware of the black-handled knife striking his thigh with each step. The silver residue along its blade had been wiped clean. Somehow, that frightened her more than if he had left it. Garrick waited in his study, Vanessa standing near the window with both arms folded. His Majesty has become interested in our cemetery, Garrick said. Apparently, you encouraged that interest. He asked me questions, and you forgot your place while answering. Mara sensed Everett behind her. She kept her spine straight. I told him the truth. Vanessa gave a brittle laugh. Truth? You dig holes, Mara. You don't possess truths. Once, those words would have sent Mara inward, searching for the familiar numbness that made humiliation survivable. This morning, 14 names stood between her and that silence. Then why are you afraid of what I remember? Vanessa's face changed. Garrick rose. The room seemed smaller when he approached. His iron signet ring caught the window light as he lifted Mara's chin with 2 fingers. Your mother had the same unfortunate habit of confusing stubbornness with courage. Mara's heart stumbled. You knew my mother? Everyone knew Ruth Ellison. For the first time, something other than contempt entered his eyes. Weariness, perhaps, or an old memory he had spent years reshaping. She forgot what Holleridge was before the resin. Empty grain stores. Children coughing blood through winter. Graves we could not dig quickly enough. His fingers left Mara's chin. Some of us made choices while others protected their principles. Mara stared at him. What choices? Garrick's expression closed. The kind that kept you alive long enough to question them. Before she could answer, Nolan Pierce's voice sounded in the corridor. Everett opened the study door just as the royal commander appeared. His Majesty requires Alpha Holloway at the Western Storehouse. Immediately, the storehouse smelled of grain, damp stone, and something sharply sweet. Callum stood beside an open trapdoor Mara had never seen before. 2 royal guards held lanterns over a narrow staircase descending underground. We found it behind 6 barrels of winter wheat, Nolan said. Garrick's expression remained controlled. Old storage tunnels. Then you won't object to showing me what you store. Callum descended first. Garrick followed. Mara expected dismissal, but Callum glanced back. She comes. The tunnels narrowed beneath the packed grounds. Mara's bracelet grew warmer with every step until the U pressed painfully against her skin. Ahead, lantern light touched pale shapes twisting through rock. Roots. Hundreds of them. Some thin as fingers. Others wider than Mara's body. Ancient tree roots. And they had been cut. Great sections lay severed across wooden tables, their interiors glowing silver. Glass jars lined the walls, filled with luminous resin. Garrick stopped beside one. The first winter we harvested it. Holleridge had 6 days of grain left, he said. No one interrupted. The southern merchants paid enough for resin to feed every family until spring. The next year, fever came. We sold more. Bought medicine. Buried fewer children. Callum crouched beside a fresh wound in the largest root. And after the famine ended? Garrick said nothing. Callum looked up. After the fever passed? Silence answered for him. Nolan moved deeper into the chamber. Callum. On a workbench lay leather restraints, stained cloth, and several small metal tags. Mara recognized the first name before Nolan lifted it. Samuel Reed. Edith Mercer's tag lay beneath his. Thomas Bell's beside that. 11 more followed. Every person Mara had buried. They worked here, she whispered. Garrick looked at Everett. Only once. Mara saw it. Callum did too. A scrape of leather sounded behind her. Everett's hand moved toward his ceremonial knife. Mara stared at its black handle and remembered the shining residue beneath Samuel's fingernails. That blade, she said. Everett froze. I saw resin on it. Callum stepped between them. Take your hand away from the weapon, Shaw. Power entered his voice, quiet and immovable. Everett obeyed. For the first time in Mara's life, Garrick Holloway looked like a man who had finally reached the end of excuses he once believed himself. Then a young guard rushed down the stairs. Alpha Holloway. Another body was found near the northern boundary. Garrick's color drained. Who? Elias Warren. Nolan turned sharply toward Callum. The groundskeeper who sent the royal message. The guard swallowed. There is one more thing, Majesty. Alpha Holloway already issued the burial order. His eyes shifted to Mara. She is to put Elias Warren in the ground before sunrise. Alone. She isn't going alone. Callum's words cut through the underground chamber before Mara could speak. Garrick recovered quickly. With respect, Majesty, burial duty belongs to Holloridge. The girl has performed it for years. Then tonight should require no urgency. Callum's ice-blue gaze settled on him. Unless Elias Warren has something you need hidden. Everett's jaw tightened. Mara expected Garrick to refuse. Instead, the Alpha smiled. Send guards if you wish. But ancient cemetery law permits only the appointed gravedigger beyond the root stones after midnight. Surely the crown still respects sacred custom. Callum's expression hardened. He knew a trap when he heard one. So did Mara. Yet somewhere above them, Elias Warren lay uncovered, already becoming another inconvenience men wanted removed before morning. I'll do it, she said. Callum turned. No. The answer came so quickly that Mara stared at him. Your Majesty, you identified evidence connecting 14 deaths to this chamber. You are now a witness. And Elias is dead because he sent for you. Nolan's eyes narrowed, but Mara continued. If I refuse, what happens to him? No one answered. She looked at Garrick. His silence told her enough. I will bury him. Callum stepped closer. How many graves have you dug for Holloridge? The question startled her. I don't know. You remembered 14 dead by name. His gaze dropped to the healing blisters across her palms. But you don't know how many times they sent you into that ground. Mara said nothing. No one had ever asked her to count the things done to her. Only the work she had completed. Callum's voice lowered. When was the last time anyone here asked if your hands hurt? The chamber became painfully quiet. Mara looked down. She could not remember. Something tightened behind her ribs, more dangerous than tears because kindness had always been harder for her to survive than cruelty. Elias still needs a grave, she whispered. Callum studied her for a long moment. Courage and surrender are not the same thing, Mara. It was the first time he had spoken her name. She raised her eyes. I know. Her voice steadied. That's why I'm choosing. Near midnight, Mara entered the cemetery carrying a lantern and shovel. Royal guards remained beyond the ancient root stones, where Garrick's law forbade them passage. Callum stood among them, a dark silhouette beneath the trees. He had argued until the final bell. Mara had gone anyway. Elias Warren waited on a wooden cart near the ancient tree. He was smaller than she expected, silver-haired and thin, dressed in a brown work coat. Bruising darkened his throat. Mara closed her eyes briefly. I'm sorry they made you wait. She began digging. The soil near the tree resisted every strike. Halfway through, footsteps approached. Everett emerged from behind the trunk. You always did make simple work difficult. Mara tightened her grip on the shovel. The king knows about the tunnels. The king knows what we allowed him to find. The words chilled her. Everett crouched beside Elias and reached for the dead man's clenched right hand. Mara moved between them. Don't move. No, Everett looked almost tired. Your mother said that word too often. Mara forgot the cold. What did you say? Open his hand. She refused. Everett seized her shoulder and shoved her aside. Mara struck the ground, pain flashing through her hip. He forced Elias's fingers apart. A silver seed shimmered in the dead man's palm. Beside it rested a broken piece of metal bearing part of the royal wolf crest. Everett reached down. Mara caught his wrist. He kept those when he had nothing else, she said. I won't let you steal them because he's too dead to stop you. His fist struck her mouth. Copper flooded her tongue. Still, Mara held on. Everett tore free and raised his hand again, but she drove her shoulder into him. The seed fell into the grass. Mara reached it first. The instant it touched her palm, Ruth's U bracelet burned. She gasped. Beneath the cemetery, something vast seemed to draw breath. Everett heard nothing. Give it to me. Mara crawled to Elias and placed the seed against his chest. She returned the broken royal crest beside it, then folded his cold hands over both. No, Everett kicked the shovel away. You think remembering names makes you brave? Mara looked up at him, blood bright on her lower lip. No, I think forgetting them made all of you cowards. Rage emptied his face. He dragged her toward the open grave. Mara fought, but Everett was stronger. Her knees struck the edge before he threw her down beside Elias. The world narrowed to wet soil and the dead man's still features. Then Mara heard it, not through her ears. The sound rose through her bones, her blistered palms, the bracelet Ruth had left behind. A whisper older than language moved beneath the earth, searching, circling, finding her. Mara stopped breathing. At 16, she had waited beneath a blanket for a wolf. At 17, she had waited again. At 18, she had begged the moon for one word. For years, silence had been the proof Holleridge used against her. Now, from somewhere among the deepest roots, a voice finally called her name. Mara Ellison. The voice did not speak again, but Mara knew she had not imagined it. Everett stood above the grave, breathing hard, his face stripped of patience. "What are you staring at?" Mara pressed one palm into the soil. A faint pulse answered beneath her skin. Once. Then silence. "Nothing," she whispered. Everett's eyes narrowed. He reached for her, but another voice carried through the cemetery. "Step away from her." Garrick Holloway emerged between the trees. Mara's relief died before it could form. Vanessa followed several paces behind him, still dressed in her evening gown beneath a wool cloak. Her face looked bloodless. "Father," she said, "you told me we were bringing Mara back." Garrick ignored her. His gaze moved from Elias to the open grave, then settled on the dead man's folded hands. "Did she find it?" Everett nodded. "The seed is with the body." Something close to terror passed across Garrick's features. "Then remove it." Mara rose unsteadily. "No." Garrick looked at her almost sadly. "Ruth should have taught you when silence is useful." Her mother's name hurt differently now. "What happened to her?" Vanessa turned toward her father. Everett stared at the ground. That was answer enough to make Mara's stomach twist. "She discovered the harvesting," Garrick said. "Your mother believed the roots were sacred. She threatened to expose us to the crown." Mara could barely force air into her lungs. 7 years of fever. 7 years of remembering Lenora changing damp cloths. Ruth growing weaker each night. Garrick sending condolences after the burial. She was sick. Eventually, the single word broke something inside Mara. She stepped forward, but Everett seized her arms. "You poisoned her." Garrick's expression remained composed. "I protected this pack. The resin bought grain during famine, medicine during fever, alliances when Holleridge had none. And Samuel? Edith? Thomas? They became liabilities." Mara looked at Vanessa. The younger woman's lips trembled. "You knew?" Mara asked. No, Vanessa's answer came too quickly, but the horror in her eyes was real. "I knew workers disappeared. Father said they had fled." Garrick exhaled impatiently. "Enough. Everett, put her in the grave." Vanessa stepped between them. "Father, move. You said she would be frightened." "Vanessa, you said no one else had to die." Garrick struck his daughter across the face. The sound seemed to shock even Everett. Vanessa stumbled, one hand rising to her cheek. Mara had imagined hating her forever. Yet watching Vanessa stare at the man she had spent her life obeying, Mara saw something painfully familiar. The moment a world built on another person's approval collapsed. Everett dragged Mara backward. She twisted, calling toward the root stones. "Callum!" From beyond the cemetery came steel against steel. Shouts. Garrick smiled without warmth. "My men are delaying the king." Ancient law can be remarkably useful when properly interpreted. Mara's heels slid through mud. Everett forced her over the edge. She fell beside Elias again, striking her shoulder. Garrick picked up the shovel. "Bury her with him." Vanessa made a broken sound. "Father, please. If you wish to remain my daughter, you will be silent." Mara looked at Elias. His hands still protected the silver seed. Lenora's page returned to her. "Speak the departed name before the earth closes. Return what they carried to the soil. Let no rank follow a soul beneath the roots. The first root remembers those the living discard." She finally understood part of it. The ritual had never been about perfect words. It was about refusing to erase a life. Garrick lifted the first shovelful. Mara placed both hands over Elias's. "Elias Warren," she said. Soil struck her legs. "Stop her," Garrick snapped. Everett jumped into the grave. Mara closed her eyes. "You carried warning to the crown. You kept what was entrusted to you." Everett grabbed her hair. Another layer of earth fell. Mara bent over Elias, shielding his hands with her body. "You will not go unnamed." The silver seed grew warm between their palms. "You will not be called worthless." Her bracelet split. A line of pale light appeared through the old you. "And you will not be forgotten." Everett froze. Beneath them came a crack deeper than thunder. Garrick dropped the shovel. Across the cemetery, every grave Mara had dug sank 1 inch into the earth. Then the ancient tree moved. The ancient tree did not awaken gently. Its trunk split with a sound like a mountain breaking open, and the cemetery heaved beneath Mara's body. Everett released her hair as a root burst through the grave wall between them, thick as a man's arm. He stumbled backward. Another struck the earth beside Garrick, tearing the shovel from his hands. "Run!" someone screamed. Mara could not. Soil pinned her legs, Elias lay beneath her, and the silver seed had become almost too hot to touch. Above, the dead branches began to tremble. One silver leaf unfolded, then another. Hundreds followed, spilling moonlit color across limbs that had stood barren for 7 years. Garrick stared upward. Impossible. The roots answered him. They raced through the burial ground, yet they did not tear blindly across the cemetery. The first curved around Edith Mercer's grave. A pale ring appeared in the soil. The next found Samuel Reed. Then Thomas Bell. Beyond them, more mounds began to shine. Every grave Mara had dug for the workers Holloridge claimed had fled. 14 forgotten lives. 14 names she had refused to surrender to silence. And beneath her hands, Elias Warren. The earth had kept count. Mara heard a whisper inside her bones. Edith. Another followed. Samuel. Thomas. The names rose around her, not as ghosts and not as voices of the dead, but as memories carried through something older than any living wolf. Mara's breath broke. She had thought she was the one refusing to forget them. All this time, the roots had been listening while she spoke. Vanessa fell to her knees. Everett stared at the illuminated graves. "What is this?" Lenora's voice came from beyond the root stones. "Witness." Everyone turned. The healer stood beside Nolan and the royal guards, her old ledger clutched against her chest. The first root does not judge the dead by rank. It remembers how the living treated those who could no longer reward or punish them. Garrick's face twisted. Old women's stories. A root snapped around Everett's wrist as he reached for his knife. Bone cracked. His scream tore through the night. Garrick looked toward Mara, and fear became hatred. "You did this." "No," Mara whispered. She looked at the shining graves. "They did." Garrick seized Everett's fallen ceremonial blade and jumped into the pit. Steel flashed above Mara. Callum landed between them. His sword caught the knife inches from her throat. Blood marked the king's temple, and part of his black cloak hung torn from one shoulder. "I warned you," Callum said quietly, "not to mistake my respect for your customs as permission to murder beneath them." Garrick shoved free. "She is wolfless. Empty. An abomination." Mara flinched before she could stop herself. The words were too old inside her. Then the ground pulsed. Every illuminated grave answered at once. Callum looked from the names Nolan had written in his notebook to the circles of light beneath the tree. Understanding crossed his face. "You gave her your dead because you thought no one else would take them," he said. Garrick went still. Callum's gaze hardened. "And every time she spoke a name you erased, the first root heard her." Silence fell. Mara remembered Vanessa laughing above the first grave. "The dead are the only wolves who won't complain about your scent." Yet the dead had never needed her scent. They had needed someone to kneel beside them when power had already walked away. "No," Garrick said. "Ruth was the keeper." "She was." Lenora's eyes filled. "And you poisoned her." Mara turned sharply. Lenora opened the ledger. Ruth Ellison was chosen at 19. She guarded the burial laws and the sacred roots until Garrick began harvesting them. When she threatened to expose him, he made her illness look natural. 7 years. Mara looked up at the silver canopy. The tree had begun losing its leaves the year Ruth died. Garrick lunged again. This time the earth rejected him. A massive root caught his waist and hurled him from the grave. Mara heard the names moving through her now. 14 workers. Elias. Ruth. Grief poured into her so fiercely she cried out. The tree had carried every life Holloridge reduced to a body, a traitor, a liability. The silver seed in Elias's hands cracked open. Light flooded the pit. "Mara." Callum reached for her. She almost took his hand, almost climbed out. Then she looked at Elias. At the open seed. At the roots waiting beneath him. "If I leave now, what happens?" Lenora's face crumpled. "The rite remains unfinished." Callum understood. "No, you told me courage and surrender aren't the same. This is different." His voice broke. "Mara, take my hand." She saw no king in his eyes. Only the man who had asked when her hands last hurt. The man who had noticed before the tree gave anyone a reason to notice. "I have to finish what they died protecting." Mara placed both palms over the seed. Pain tore through her arms. Light climbed her veins. The roots closed above her. Darkness swallowed everything. No wolf. No moon. No breath. Then the ancient presence touched the silent place inside Mara, the place Hollow Ridge had called empty, and found every name she had carried there. The roots opened. Mara arose from the grave as silver leaves spiraled around her. A living mark shaped like branching roots burned across her palm. Every wolf fell silent. Callum stared at the sign, recognition draining the color from his face. Then the Alpha King lowered his sword, stepped forward, and went down on one knee. Callum remained on one knee until Mara spoke. "Please stand." Her voice sounded unfamiliar to her, roughened by soil and pain. He obeyed immediately. No argument. No command disguised as concern. Around them, the cemetery looked like a place caught between ruin and rebirth. Silver leaves covered the graves. Ancient roots rested above the earth like sleeping animals. Everett lay restrained beneath Nolan's guards, one wrist bent at an unnatural angle. Garrick had been dragged beyond the root stones, where royal soldiers bound his hands in iron. Vanessa sat alone in the mud, staring at her father as if she had never seen his face before. Mara climbed from Elias's grave with Callum close enough to catch her, but careful not to touch. The restraint hurt more than she expected. Lenora reached her first. "Mara," the healer's voice broke. Mara looked at the ledger pressed against the older woman's chest. "You knew?" Lenora closed her eyes. "Not everything." "Enough." The word landed quietly. Lenora nodded. "Enough to be afraid." Mara waited. For once, she would not make another person's confession easier. "Your mother came to me after she discovered the harvesting," Lenora said. "She was already ill, or I believed she was. Garrick told me the weakness came from her work with the roots." Her fingers tightened around the ledger. "I prepared the tonics he approved. When Ruth worsened, I questioned the dosage. He reminded me my daughter was 7 and that healers who accused alphas of poisoning keepers sometimes left children without mothers." Mara's throat tightened. "So you stayed silent?" "Yes." Lenora did not look away. "Every year afterward, I called my fear caution because it sounded kinder." Wind moved through the silver canopy. Mara thought of Ruth's hands fastening the U-bracelet around her wrist. "I don't know if I can forgive you." Lenora's mouth trembled. "You shouldn't have to decide tonight." Mara looked at the royal guards. "But you will testify." "Yes." "In front of Hollow Ridge." Lenora swallowed. "Yes." Only then did Mara step away. Vanessa had risen. Mud stained the knees of her pale dress. "Mara." She spoke the name without mockery. Mara turned. Vanessa's face looked emptied of every certainty she had inherited. "My father said the workers left Hollow Ridge," she whispered. "He said your mother was unstable. He said you were—" Her voice failed. I repeated everything. Mara remembered laughter above an open grave. "Dig deeper, Wolfless." "Yes," she said. Vanessa flinched. Mara did not soften the truth. "You did." Tears gathered in Vanessa's eyes. "What do I do now?" "Tell Nolan where your father keeps his private records." Vanessa stared at her. Then she removed a silver chain from beneath her collar. A small iron key hung from it. "His study," she said. "There's a cabinet hidden behind the northern map. This is the only key." Nolan stepped forward. "What's inside?" Vanessa looked toward Garrick, bound beyond the root stones. Everything he never trusted the Pack Council to see. She pulled the chain over her head and placed the iron key directly into Nolan's palm. "Open it." Nolan closed his fingers around the key. "I will." It was not forgiveness. It was not absolution. But it was a choice Vanessa had made with full knowledge of what it might cost her. Mara understood the difference now. A sharp warmth moved through her chest. She caught her breath. Callum turned instantly. "What is it?" "I don't know." The warmth came again, pulling toward him. Mara pressed a hand beneath her collarbone. Callum went very still. His ice-blue eyes changed. Not with fear. Recognition. "Mara," he said carefully. "Do you feel something when I move closer?" She almost laughed from exhaustion. "Tonight, I have felt roots speak through my bones." "You'll need to be more specific." A startled breath escaped him, nearly a laugh. Then he took one step forward. Warmth spread beneath Mara's ribs. He stepped back. It weakened. Mara stared at him. "What is that?" Callum's jaw tightened. "A bond." The cemetery seemed to tilt. "No, I am not asking anything from you. I'm wolfless." "I know. Wolfless Omegas don't have mate bonds." "Apparently." The old laws remember things our packs forgot. Mara looked at the branching mark on her palm. You knew what this was. Not until tonight. But you recognized it. Callum's gaze returned to the living mark. The Crown Archives led me to burial laws older than the Northern Throne. The earliest records describe a keeper whose authority over sacred ground predates royal rule itself. I thought those accounts were legend. His eyes shifted toward Elias's grave. I won't make that mistake again. Mara looked at him. So the tree chose me, and now the moon gives me a king? Pain crossed Callum's face. No. The answer came with such certainty that she went still. The tree chose you for reasons that belong to you. If there is a bond between us, it does not make me your reward or you mine. His voice lowered. And I will not use it to claim a woman who has spent her life being ordered into graves. Something inside Mara cracked. Not painfully, but enough to let warmth reach a place she had kept cold for years. Callum extended no hand, made no promise. He simply stood beside her. For the first time, Mara wondered if gentleness could exist without a price. Beneath them, the earth pulsed once. Mara looked down. A thin silver line moved beneath the soil from Elias's grave toward the ancient tree. The roots were still waiting. And somehow, she knew the story of the dead was not finished yet. The pulse beneath Mara's palm came again. Stronger. She looked at Callum, but the question between them would have to wait. The silver seed had begun to move. A slender shoot pierced the soil above Elias Warren's grave, pale as moonlight and trembling in the dawn air. Across the cemetery, the remaining black branches of the ancient tree creaked. It needs something, Lenora whispered. Mara remembered the old rite. Return what they carried to the soil. Let no rank follow a soul beneath the roots. She rose. Bring me the burial records. Garrick's ledgers arrived before noon. So did the contents of the cabinet Nolan opened with the iron key. Vanessa had surrendered. Death orders. Falsified departure notices. Resin accounts. At the bottom rested a narrow bottle bearing an old healer's mark. Lenora stared at it. Nitroot. Her face tightened with shame. A little each day mimics wasting fever. Mara closed her eyes. Ruth had not simply been killed. Garrick had made her death look ordinary, so her daughter would never know there was anything to question. Beneath the bottle lay a letter in Ruth Ellison's hand. Mara unfolded it carefully. There was no prophecy. No promise that her child would one day become powerful. Only words written to Elias. If Mara is born without a wolf, protect her from those who mistake silence for emptiness. The first root does not choose by rank, blood, or fong. It chooses the one who remembers what power forgets. Mara read the lines again. At 16, she had waited beneath a blanket for a wolf to tell her she belonged. At 17, she waited longer. At 18, she begged the moon for a single word. She had spent years believing silence was an answer. Now she understood. She had been waiting for the wrong voice to tell her who she was. The tree had chosen the woman she had already become each time she knelt beside someone Hollowridge discarded and spoke a name no one else cared to remember. 3 weeks later, Garrick Holloway stood before the royal court. Lenora testified first. Vanessa followed, confirming the hidden cabinet and the key she had surrendered to Nolan. Everett confessed to killing Elias and 4 workers under Garrick's orders. The remaining deaths were traced through payment lists and burial tags. Garrick was stripped of rank and sentenced under Crown law for murder, treason, and desecration of the sacred roots. Everett received judgment for the lives he had taken. Vanessa inherited nothing. She asked for nothing. Mara found her one morning carrying stones along the cemetery path with the other workers. You don't have to do this, Mara said. Vanessa placed another stone into the earth. I know. Mara watched her continue. Forgiveness was not a door someone opened with one apology. But change, Mara thought, sometimes began when no one was forcing you to stay. Her first decree as keeper was not about a throne. Every unmarked grave would be identified where possible and given a name stone. Beneath the silver canopy, 14 workers' names were spoken aloud. Edith Mercer, Samuel Reed, Thomas Bell. 11 others Hollowridge had tried to erase. Then Mara stood before Elias Warren's grave and said his name too. Last of all came Ruth Ellison. Lenora wept openly. Mara's voice broke, but neither woman looked away. Then Mara planted Elias's living shoot among the oldest roots. Light traveled beneath the ground. The remaining dark limbs brightened one after another until the entire ancient tree shimmered silver against the evening sky. Hollow Ridge fell silent. They had forced a wolfless Omega to carry the people they wanted forgotten. They had believed graves were beneath them, and Mara beneath even that. But every time she closed a stranger's eyes, returned a final possession, or whispered a name into the soil, the first root had listened. The work meant to prove her worthlessness had become the testimony by which something older than their bloodlines chose her. Callum found Mara beneath the restored canopy after everyone left. He wore no crown. "The bond is still there," Mara said. "Yes. You haven't claimed me." A faint smile touched his face. "You have spent your life being told what you are, where you belong, and what your body lacks. I will not turn destiny into another order." Mara studied him. "Then what do you want?" Callum extended his hand. "Permission to walk beside you, however long it takes." Warmth moved through the bond, deep and unmistakable. The moon had tied something between them. The ancient tree had marked her. For most of Mara's life, other people had treated every difference in her body as a verdict. She would not make destiny another one. Callum waited. He did not reach farther. Mara looked at his open palm and remembered the man who had noticed her scraped hands before silver leaves gave the world a reason to stare. "Yes," she said. "Not the tree. Not the moon. Mara." She placed her hand in his. The bond opened like sunrise, and Callum closed his eyes as if receiving something sacred rather than taking what belonged to him. Mara laughed through sudden tears. Above them, one silver leaf drifted down and settled against Ruth's repaired you bracelet. For 22 years, Mara Ellison had thought silence meant there was nothing inside her worth answering. She knew better now. She had never been empty. She had simply spent too long waiting for a wolf, a pack, or a prophecy to give her a name she already possessed. The ancient tree had chosen her because she remembered the forgotten. Callum loved her without asking her to become smaller. And when Mara stepped forward with her hand in his, it was not because fate had spoken first. It was because, at last, she had learned to trust her own voice.